Hello and welcome back. Today we are looking at Dev Diary 71, which is all about autonomous investment. I will not be explaining it, instead it will be an AI. No, I will be talking about it, and we'll be taking a look at it. This is a pretty big development. Apparently it's somewhat controversial because some people really like that you can control all the construction, and what this will do is instead have autonomous investment done by our capitalists, which, in my mind, I really like this for two reasons. One, it's more realistic, and two, when you get really, really large economies, it's actually really annoying to try and keep up with the construction queue. Here, the AI will be doing it for you, and you will not have to get, the perfectionist in you will not have to worry about the fact that the game is, building in ways you don't like, because, okay, it's going to be building in ways you don't like, but it's not going to be your fault. So it's this is just part of the game now. So let's jump into it. So, as with 1.12, as with 1.1, we will have bug fixes in 1.2, UI improvements and AI changes, this sort of stuff. The AI is getting better. On release, it basically didn't build construction centers, so there was no economic growth on behalf of the AI, and it was very easy to just take a one-state country and just run the train through them. And now it's becoming more difficult, but still they are not very good at growing their economy. They are not very good at using economies of scale bonuses. So when you build up a ton of buildings in a single province, you get a very large economy of scale bonus. It scales up and up and up. So you have to be thinking long-term and not just looking at the short-term profitability of the buildings. So when you build the first building, you get 100% of a building, right? When you build the second, you actually get 102% of the building. You get the 100% of the second building, plus the 1% throughput bonus on the second building for economies of scale, and the 1% on the previous building. When you build the 51st building, provided you have all the text for economies of scale, what ends up happening is you get 200% of a building. You get 100% from the building itself, 50% from the max throughput bonus of 50%, and 50% on from all the 1% increase from 49 to 50% on the previous 50 buildings. So that last 51st building is worth 2 buildings. The second building is worth 102% of a building. And the AI, in my mind, does not appreciate that as you get closer and closer, you get a bigger and bigger bonus. Instead, they just look at the marginal building, i.e. the second building, and they'll say, okay, labor is cheap in this province, I'm going to build a second tooling workshop in this other province, rather than just stacking tooling workshops in a single province in order to abuse the economies of scale bonus. So let's say I have 2 provinces, instead of just building tooling workshops up in one, what it will do is it'll spread them all out. And I think that this is what we'll have with autonomous investment. Where we will be forced to spread out industries in a way that is inefficient in the long term, because they will only look at the marginal, profitability of building a single workshop or whatever it is there, and it will be better because the labor will be cheaper in the place that doesn't already have the building, and so they will build there for cheaper labor. Also, they'll probably, I don't know if they're going to build an unincorporated territory. We'll see if there's a way to massage this or what have you. Anyways, let's get back into this, but this is kind of why autonomous investment is thinking about economies of scale bonuses. I think is probably a good way for evaluating autonomous investment in general, because what it is going to do is it is going to take control out of the hands of the player, which makes it harder for you to use get economies of scale bonus. Okay. What we said back then is we're going to never take construction out of the player's hands entirely in Dev Diary 64, which is, a big complaint that people have been making between Victoria 2 and Victoria 3 is that the player has too much control in Vicky 3. And we came up with a system where the investment pool will be used by private entities to construct types of buildings depending on your economics laws. So right now, a big part of what pays for your construction good cost is private entities, funding it. I'm curious to see, so what happens is, depending on your laws, so if you have laissez-faire, you get an investment pool contribution, and this can be used to only pay for construction goods. What I'm curious to see is if now the investment pool contribution can be used to pay for the labor on the construction centers itself, because currently you cannot use it to pay the labor. I think that if you're saying that they are getting to pick what gets built, they should have to pay for the labor, which changes the dynamics quite a little bit. I don't think they've mentioned that whether or not this is the case inside this Dev Diary, but we'll take a look. Okay. I want to first mention, we already talked about this, that the community is somewhat split on the issue of autonomous construction, and as such, we've opted to create a new game rule for autonomous investment. I don't know if this is going to make it so that it disables achievements. I think achievements should only be achievable with autonomous investment on, but I think you should be able to pick. The reason why is if you are building all of this stuff yourself, you can do stuff like abuse economies of scale more easily than you can if it gives you an advantage to be able to pick everything yourself, but it's an annoying advantage in that you have to do a lot more clicking. So by default, autonomous investment is enabled, which puts investment pool out of the hands of the player, but you can choose to disable it. Okay, and this is work in progress. All right. Regardless of whether or not it's enabled, investment pool pretty much works the same way as it did before. Certain pops with ownership shares in buildings pay a part of their dividends to the investment pool, which funds can then be drawn out for construction. So currently, you can only get investment pool contribution from two different pops, capitalists and also landowners. They are going to be changing that. First, the key types of pops that can be invested are just aristocrats and capitalists, and they're also going to include farmers and shopkeepers, which is a pretty big deal because currently, when you go Council Republic in your laws, you lose out on investment pool entirely. Now you will not because farmers will be contributing. Capitalists invest the highest percentage of their dividends, 20%, followed by aristocrats, with farmers and shopkeepers 5% each. So it's still probably going to be the case that going laissez-faire and relying on the capitalists pretty heavily is going to be the best way to maximize construction in the early to mid game. And then late game, you might want to change things up depending on what your economy looks like, how profitable marginal buildings are. You know, as you build up more and more buildings, each marginal building gets less profitable in general, and so construction becomes less important, but it's still probably the biggest and most important stat you can have in your economy, unless you just have like absurd things going on. Like if you're running a shortage of sulfur, lead, you can't build any more stuff to build fabric, so you have a shortage of fabric. If you have a shortage on all these, construction becomes pretty useless, but it's really hard to get a shortage on all of them. Secondly, the proportion of dividends that are paid into the investment pool varies in 1.1 based on your laws, which can have some pretty bizarre effects, such as switching to laissez-faire suddenly creating a bunch of capitalist radicals because they are now investing more money and thus end up with a drop in their wealth. This is a really funny effect. You sometimes see it. One way, for example, you can try and keep the capitalists in power sometimes is switching from laissez-faire to interventionalism. And this should not make them less powerful or more powerful, but it does because it gives them more of their own wealth instead of putting it in the investment pool. Especially if they're happy with you, they will be giving you 20% flat, right off of their off of laissez-faire, and then an additional 20% from the job creators. From the interest group being happy with you while they are powerful, so if they're above 20% clout, or 18% if they were powerful before. And so what this will do is 40% of what they're getting paid is going into the investment pool, and if they're not getting paid a whole lot, as your buildings become less competitive, they can start experiencing a drop in wealth and clout. So switching to interventionalism sometimes makes them more powerful, which it shouldn't. The proportion of the funds that are now invested is now a fixed percentage based on pop type, which is then subjected to an efficiency bonus. So this efficiency bonus, oftentimes when you just hand around money in your economy, and like when you tax your pops, instead of your pops getting the money, you get the money, and no new money has been created or destroyed, right? It's this principle of conservation. With an efficiency bonus, money will get created or destroyed if there is a malice. Capitalists always invest 20% of their dividends, for example, but under laissez-faire, the investment ends up more efficient and contributing more money to the investment pool. So they are always giving up 20% of their money, but now the investment pool increases by an amount that is different than the amount they're contributing, so money does get created or destroyed. I don't know how I feel about this, but the conservation is no longer the case. Okay. There's a general investment efficiency bonus for payments into the investment pool in small and mid-based economies, and a penalty to ensure that investment pool is also relevant for mid-sized countries while not growing to absurd proportions that it cannot possibly be spent in a 10 billion GDP country. 10 billion, not even that big. So it seems that it throttles these efficiency bonuses are meant to be an abstract system of foreign investment, which is something we've mentioned is in our under our radar in Dev Diary 64. When I was 18, I tried to start a company with someone, and he was not the brightest, and he we were talking about torpedo, whatever it was, but like one of the slogans was going under the radar. You don't go under a radar. If you're under the radar, you're never mind. That's a tangent. Okay, so let's get into this. So agrarianism, we could take a look at a mock-up that they have for agrarianism. You could subsidize all these things. Now you have this 50% investment contribution efficiency. So the aristocrats are always giving up 10% of their wealth, but now you get 50% more to your investment pool. So money is being created out of nothingness. Also, you get more contribution from farmers, and then less from capitalists. So this is a bit interesting. So I guess they will just always be contributing. And traditionalism, what traditionalism might look like is it might just be minus 100% on everyone, so that you don't get a contribution at all. So then how does investment pool get turned into buildings when autonomous investment is enabled? Well, autonomously, of course, thanks. With autonomous investment, the construction queue is split into private and public constructions, with government constructions being anything, regardless of whether it's a government building or not, ordered to be built or auto-expanded by the player or country-level AI. Well, a private construction is anything that pops they themselves are building. So, it is split, but how does your construction, the question is how does your construction as a stat get distributed? And the construction capacity of the country will be split between the private and government queues in proportions based on your economic law. Okay, so this is how it will be split. So I assume laissez-faire, maybe it's like 80% to private and 20% to government, and then interventionalism might be 50-50 or something like this. Though if there isn't enough construction queued of one type to use its full allocation, the excess can be used by the other queue instead, which is quite nice because you can just, fill up the queue in terms of your government stuff and just leave it, and then it'll manage itself, and the private institutions will also inject a lot of investment. But the thing I am curious about is who is going to pay the people in the construction center, because currently, when you have a really, really big investment pool contribution, what ends up happening is they cover all the construction goods costs, but they don't cover any of the workers, the government wages of the workers. What should happen is whatever proportion of these is put into private construction, that proportion, the wages should be paid by the investment pool contribution. And hopefully that is the case. I don't remember reading anything about this because I read through this entire thing, but this should be the case because, if they're paying for the entire building to be built, they should pay for the wages of them as well. But this is kind of a fine-tuned detail, which hopefully they recognize. In the construction scene, you'll be able to see what's planned next in the private construction along with its current funding level. This funding level will be calculated based on the total funds available in the investment pool, as well as weekly funds coming in, blah, blah, blah. Once the project is ready, it will be added to the construction queue in the next ticks. Private constructions, unlike government ones, cannot be prioritized or canceled. They will always be built in the order they are queued up by POPs. So you will have to manually delete the buildings yourself if you don't want them, which might be something you have to end up doing a lot. Hopefully, we get more fine-tuned tools to kind of massage the AI in the direction we want in the form of like either regulation or subsidies, or, well, I guess subsidies are already in the game, but I mean, the subsidies of the form where we don't just pay the wages deemed like a more nuanced subsidy where it just says, we pay for 5% of the cost of iron, which will encourage the price of iron to just all iron mines to be more profitable, but only up to a certain point, and it won't get all the wages subsidized. Anyways, so though the government is currently building nothing in France, there are several private constructions in progress and plans for expansion in the Alsace, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see there are some stuff left and no government constructions. This is, I think, quite a nice bifurcation. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff that's going to be needed to make this feel like the way to make it feel realistic, but okay, I think that it's way more realistic than the current system, where you don't have a command economy, but you're deciding every single building that gets constructed yourself. Pop-ordered constructions use a variant of standard construction AI, which doesn't take into account the country level's AI strategic objectives and reprioritizes the creation of profitable buildings, which will create lucrative jobs for the investing pop types. Currently, in 1.2, the AI does something that's really stupid, is that if they can't find a building that's profitable enough, it seems to be the case that they just expand ports infinitely. And so when you're conquering states, you just notice everywhere has a level 20 port that's set on anchorage, and it's like, this is ridiculous. You're just you're incurring a ton of you do have to pay the wages on the anchorages, and they're giving nothing to you, and so why are you building up to 20? And then even if you are doing that, when you switch the PMs over, it's really expensive. It's just a really big error on part of the AI. I assume that they just are, if they can't find a building that they like, they just build anchorages to make use of the construction, and this is how it happens. But okay. But they will take into account some more strategic factors, such as building railroads in low infrastructure states. This would be fantastic if the AI just took care of building all the railroads in low infrastructure states. I'd be so happy about this, because currently, when you start to reach late game is just whack-a-mole simulator, where all you're doing is just building railroads to handle the infrastructure. And if you never, this is something that could be automated very easily, and it shouldn't be under the cognitive load of the player, because the player is just going to build the infrastructure whenever it's needed. This is the heuristic. The heuristic is very simple. There's no strategy. You're not ever, I cannot think of a strategy where you ever want to intentionally run an infrastructure malice. I guess I could think of one or invent one, but there's it shouldn't be done. And so that the AI is going to start handling that with the construction queue maybe makes it so that you just never build a railroad yourself as the player in order to force the AI into building it, or the automated construction. Just as with the country level AI, they have certain access to system of spending variables described in Diary 53, which means they do not operate on a snapshot of the current market, but understand factors such as the impact of already queued buildings, private and government ordered both, will have on prices once completed and staffed. Okay. So this means you can probably massage them into building particular things just by queuing a bunch of stuff you have no intention of finishing. So for example, if you don't want the AI to build tools, you can probably manipulate them by just putting 100 tooling workshops in your queue, and then the AI will look at it and be like, tools will not be profitable, we're not going to build tools. And so I guess this might just make micromanagement way harder if this effect is very strong, because you're if you want the AI to build one specific thing, you just put everything else in your queue and you just juggle it to the bottom of the queue constantly, so that the AI is only this will be profitable and it only builds this. But okay. Since autonomous investment does not only affect player countries, you might be wondering how this system works together with AI. A little bit. The answer is actually quite well. Together with a bunch of AI improvement and fixes in 1.2, this has resulted in more stable economic growth for AI countries, especially seems to have given Great Britain a boost, as private sector doing its own thing means usually the economy is growing, even if the country's treasury is having issues, at least as long as the pop investing in private sector growth are making healthy profits. There are still some issues, particularly when the AI runs out of available... Ooh, this is the sentence. There's still some issues, particularly when AI runs out of available workforce late game that we are hoping to tackle before 1.2 to further improve AI's growth. So, yeah, you generally run out of available workforce. I wouldn't even call it late game, pretty early on if you are constructing a lot, which you should be. And so if the AI breaks down when you have no available labor, then this system's not even really a system, is it? I assume it'll just build the most profitable thing, but if that's not how it works, okay. I was very pleased to see this screenshot. It's taken from 1908, and if you look at the GDPs are a lot healthier than they are currently in 1.1, and this is very nice. And that's it for today. So, I'm very excited about this new system, which will hopefully inject a little bit of, interesting. So it's going to kneecap the player. It's going to make the player weaker. But what it will do, in return, is add some realism and also add some dynamism. Hopefully, it does not make it so that you as the player have to do something really oblique, like in order to abuse the AI, which, let's see. So they do not take a snapshot of the current market, but understand factors such as the impact of already queued buildings. Hopefully it does not make it so that you as the player, in order to min-max and control the AI, what you will have to do is just put hundreds of stuff into the queue that you have no intention of building just to force the AI not to build it, because they look at the queue and they're like, oh, there's 100 tooling workshops, this is bad, we can't build any tools. Hopefully this is not, it doesn't make things more difficult. We'll see how strong effect this is, and because abusing the AI in that fashion would be not a fun from a player perspective. But if you feel you have to min max against the AI, what the AI is doing, then you would have to do something like that. But I'm hoping what it does is it makes a lot of the late game becomes really insufferable because you have to keep up with the construction queue. If the AI is doing most of the construction queue stuff for you, because a lot of what pays for the construction queue is the investment pool transfer, then this will be quite nice. It'll also make decisions like whether to go agrarian or industrial or like mix. I think it'll make it a little bit more nuanced. Hopefully interventionalism becomes better and laissez-faire just isn't like best, which seems to be the case right now. If you have laissez-faire but they will never construct any type of rural stuff other than mines, then, well, I guess they construct mines and logging camps, but I'm not sure exactly how good this will be. And they construct those because they are owned by the industrialists, but they won't build farms. You can still just import cotton or whatever, or fabric, but this is a big development for the game in terms of adding layers to the realism. I hope on top of this, or not on top of this in 1.2, because I don't think that's realistic, but they add systems that allow you to kind of encourage the AI to go a particular way with the investment pool, like subsidies that are not absolute. So the way subsidies currently work is it forces you to pay a wage such that the place will be fully employed no matter what. And this is, I would prefer subsidies that are like, going to subsidize the building 5%, where whatever the price of the good is at the end, we will pay 5%. The government pays for 5% of that good whenever it gets purchased or something like this. Like the tax rebate, for example, on electrical vehicles, you get like $5,000 back. So effectively the government's paying $5,000 off the top or whatever on all EVs. And so something like this, where you could, subsidize in a way that will allow it to reach an equilibrium that is not full employment. Because right now, when you subsidize a building, you force it to go to full employment. And you cannot take a building from 25% employed to 50% employed through your subsidy. There's no fine-tuned type of subsidy. And if you had a fine-tuned type of subsidy, I think you could encourage the AI to build particular things without just crushing your economy, such like the United States government subsidizing EVs to encourage people to build EVs, but they don't just pay the entire cost, or like they just don't guarantee profitability, which is what subsidies do right now in game. And it's a very blunt instrument that doesn't feel very nice to use. At least from my perspective. You can subsidize particular buildings, right, in particular states, but for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of the way subsidies work. I wish that they were a little bit more fine-tuned, and if this, them being more fine-tuned would work well in conjunction with, your ability to have this automated construction, which is more realistic, with, this is the player being able to decide everything that gets constructed. Again, with the what we said at the start, it really allows them to abuse economies of scale relative to the AI, and so taking that away from the player will add to both realism and difficulty, which currently the game is ridiculously easy. You could start out with pretty much any one state country and be the number one great power, within 80 years or whatever, way less probably, depending on your situation in terms of the one state start. But it's the game is insanely easy. The AI is really bad at growing their economy, and they can't think long term at all. And they certainly can't think long term for like building up the economies of scale bonuses, which I think that the AI for the auto construction will not take that into account. They will just look at, there's one tooling workshop here, the next one will be 102% of a building effectively, and then why build it here when we can build it someplace with cheaper labor? And maybe they build an unincorporated territory, which would be kind of annoying because you don't like to have industry there, but we'll see how it goes. Anyways, I think I'm starting to ramble, so we will call it a recording for now. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any type of special requests for stuff to get covered, feel free to let me know, and have a good day.